welcome to World Insight, coming to you live from Beijing on CCTV News. I'm your host, Tian Wei. On today's program, Brazil in crisis. Brazilian President Dilma Rousseff faces possible impeachment and accusations of trying to shield her predecessor from corruption charges as the country enters its second year of economic recession. Are her days in office numbered? And ahead of the Boao Forum, Secretary General Zhou Wenzhong chats with us about the value of economic cooperation. Then we hear from Schwarzman, business magnate and CEO and founder of Blackstone Group. He's donating some of his significant wealth to education in China, introducing Schwarzman Scholars Program at Tsinghua University. And we enter today's program. Let's begin with the political crisis in Brazil. The country is experiencing a tumultuous week after President Dilma Rousseff appointed her predecessor, Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, as chief of staff for her cabinet, only to immediately be blocked by a federal judge. And Rousseff is facing a possible impeachment amid Brazil's worst recession in decades. As the country gears up to host the Olympic Games this year, it's impossible to predict with any degrees of confidence whether the government of President Dilma Rousseff will survive this time.
Protests have erupted in Brazil after a federal judge leaked a recorded phone call between President Dilma Rousseff and her predecessor Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, in which the current president is possibly alluding to shielding Lula from corruption charges. Thousands of people gathered in the capital Brasilia to demand that Lula step down and Rousseff leave office.
When we see Lula in jail and Dilma Rousseff gone, then we will leave. Not before that, no way.
Rousseff appointed Lula as her chief of staff last Wednesday, a move that observers say both strengthens her political base and shields her mentor Lula from money laundering and fraud charges. Cabinet ministers can only be tried in the privileged forum of the Supreme Court, which would drag out the process over many years. Almost immediately after Rousseff appointed Lula, Justice Gilmar Mendes issued a preliminary injunction blocking the appointment. That injunction will hold until the full court can rule on the legality of President Rousseff's decision to appoint Lula as her chief of staff. The injunction followed at least a dozen motions to suspend last week's appointment, according to reports. Meanwhile, Senator Delcidio Amaral made bombshell allegations claiming that President Rousseff was directly involved in corruption at the state oil company Petrobras and that she actively tried to block the investigation. Government supporters say that the injunction and the impeachment process are simply attempts to breach the democratic process.
They're attempting a coup, and it's not against the government, it's against democracy. It's much worse.
President Rousseff's political career is on the ropes in the political equivalent of a bare-knuckle fight for her survival. And as the country enters its second year of severe recession, Brazil's future remains deeply uncertain.
And for more on Brazil's latest political crisis, we are now joined in our Beijing studio by Charles Tang, who is the president of the Brazil-China Chamber of Commerce and Industry. He is joining us here in Beijing. Welcome to our program, Mr. Tang. Good to see you. And also joining us in San Francisco, we have Mr. Paulo Sotelo, who is the director of the Brazil Institute of Woodrow Wilson International Center for Scholars. Welcome to you as well, Mr. Sotelo. Let me ask the both of you. What do you make of the latest back and forth situation, and what do you make of the immediate fate of President Rousseff in the latest rounds of apparent crisis? Mr. Sotelo.
Well, President Dilma Rousseff is in a very difficult position. Not only because of the nature of the allegations that are against her now. Delcidio Amaral, that you mentioned, was her leader in the Senate of Brazil until November, and now he is accusing her of being part of the scandal. The scandal is the stealing from Petrobras of hundreds of millions or billions of dollars, and maybe compromising the viability, the future viability of Petrobras. It's particularly shocking because President Dilma Rousseff had until last year a reputation of being an honest person, not particularly talented as a politician, but an honest person. She is in a very difficult political position, while the economy in Brazil is on a in free fall, second year of recession, as you mentioned.
So, Mr. Sotero, may I let you to clarify what exactly you want to say? Do you think the latest round of crisis is about her credibility, or her personality, or is this latest round of crisis about the general economic situation in Brazil and people's, in a way, impatience about the realities? What exactly is the nature of the latest crisis?
No, people in Brazil are absolutely fed up with corruption. Brazilians have always been very patient about that. And now we have a new generation of judges, of prosecutors that are sort of responding to a demand from the people to clean up Brazilian politics. It's very corrupt. It's not only in the government. You can also include parts of the opposition in that. President Dilma Rousseff, the allegations of criminal conduct, it's a political crisis in nature right now. And we are not going to be able to address the economic crisis, that is also very serious, until we resolve the political crisis. And this will probably go through an impeachment of a president.
Mr. Tang, do you agree this is a political crisis in nature with an economic situation at the background?
I think the economic crisis is a byproduct of the political crisis.
Explain.
You know, people, the instability, the economic uncertainties, the economic instability is a direct result also of the fierce political infighting that exists. Like Mr. Sotero said, of course, you know, everybody must applaud the fight against corruption. However, for example, in Brazil, when you jail the owner or the president of a large or huge construction company, you don't protect the company and you don't protect the jobs. In other countries, even in China where the corrupt people go to jail, the companies are protected and the employment are protected. So you don't have massive, you know, economic paralysis and massive unemployment. So I think that the fierce political infighting, also coupled with the tremendous amount of corruption that has been uncovered, is leading to such instability that the economic crisis is becoming much deeper. Now, as a Brazilian, I would love to see the politicians get together, lift Brazil out of the crisis, and then continue their fighting.
Well, Mr. Tan, you're talking about something unlikely to happen when you say politicians gather together from various political parties. That's almost like a wishful thinking. So let me ask you about some reality checks. What do you make of the links? Of course, this is totally up to the issue, the rule of law inside your country, but what do you make of the latest accusation of corruption against the President Rousseff, first of all, and also her predecessor? And now she, of course, was trying to appoint him to back into the cabinet in order to avoid the prosecution that, of course, is stated by the law in Brazil. That didn't happen, at least for now, because federal judge refused to do that. So what do you make of the latest situation at this stage and the corruption issue related to the current president, your judgment?
Well, corruption among politicians and in politics in Brazil has always existed. Because although Brazil wants democracy, it never created a system to finance this democracy. For example, when you're elected, when you are a campaign for to be a governor or to be a congressman or a senator, you have to spend millions to become elected.
Yeah.
And, you know, even if you serve the entire term of your election, you will never, your salary will not pay for it. So you have to have donations. But there is no legal manner for over the board donations. So people donate to politicians expecting something in return. And a lot of it is under the table.
So, Delo, is Mr. Tang finding excuses for the current administration in terms of the roots of their quote-unquote suspected corruption?
Well, what the charge against President Dilma Rousseff is more one of cover-up than of corruption that she would have been involved in. President Rousseff, I think, retains a reputation among Brazilians of personal honesty. Actually, early in her term, she fired a lot of people, including some of the people now that have become key players in this scandal. Former Petrobras senior officials, she fired them and she was credited by the people for that. She became very popular initially in her term. Former President Lula, who was a revered person in Brazil, a very important man, and for democracy in Brazil, a transformative figure in Brazil, he is accused of more serious things, of personal enrichment, and now there are allegations that he was really the person behind the whole scheme of Petrobras, of the stealing from Petrobras. If that proves to be true, it is an enormous charge, and former President Lula, who left power in 2010 with 85% of approval, is now at much lower approval ratings. He has lost that sense of invulnerability that he had from popularity.
Right.
And, you know, the courts will have to decide that. He is now being blocked from assuming a position with President Dilma Rousseff, her chief of staff, because justices believe and judges that that would consist into an obstruction of justice type of operation.
But the recent political turmoil, is it really likely to help figure things out, to help to understand whether one administrative official, even including the president, is corruptive or not? That's a big question mark. When we talk about this big question mark, we see the country of Brazil being divided at this moment. Although millions, as reported by the press, protesters took to the streets demanding Rousseff's resignation, she does still have some support, but not much, at least according to some data. A new poll by respected Datafolha agency reveals what Brazilian thinks of her. 68% people surveyed want to see Rousseff impeached. 10% rated Rousseff's government good or excellent, with 69% calling it bad or terrible. Of course, you could never believe in surveys 100%. It really depends on who is doing the survey, what kind of questions being asked, who are the ones being called on to answer those questions, under what circumstances. These are all interesting tricks in surveys. But let me come back to you, Mr. Tan. If the number as exaggerated as already indicated in that survey, does President Rousseff really have many days left in her office?
Well, you know, well, first of all, I'd like to say that I was never trying to find excuses for.
Of course, I'm just trying to pose a question to Mr. Sotelo.
Yeah, but anyhow, I do think that she is going to face a very, very tough time. However, under the rules defined by the Supreme Court of Brazil, the last say about her impeachment falls with the Senate. And in the Senate, we really don't know. You know, a few months ago, I could say the Senate would block her impeachment. But today, I don't know.
What is the makeup of the Senate?
Well, I mean, within the Senate, let's say the government still has a number of important allies.
And that would make it the majority or minority?
Well, you
big
need
majority or much smaller minority? These are important questions.
Yeah, you need a big majority to
Of
approve
course.
an impeachment. I
Yes.
think it's 2/3. Mr. Sotero can probably tell us.
All
if
right,
it
Mr.
is.
Sotelo,
Yes.
your job.
That is precisely right. You need 2/3 in the House to indict the president, to impeach the president. Then there is a simple majority in the Senate that accepts the case. Then 2/3 to remove the president. The problem of President Dilma Rousseff
Yeah, what
is
about the allies? The percentage of allies that the current administration could have.
Her allies are leaving her. The vice president of Brazil, for instance, did not show up in this inauguration of President Lula in his new position. His party, called the PMDB, which is the largest party in the House and in the Senate now, has already announced they will call this month, the 29th, a meeting that was scheduled for later in order to reach a decision to abandon the coalition. So very likely, before the end of this month, the main ally of the PT of President Dilma will no longer be in government. And the numbers will be likely there to remove the president if the impeachment process moves forward. And as was said, this follows a ritual that was established and revisited just last December by the Supreme Court, with decisions that were seen by Dilma and the government as a victory, as a political victory, because they thought that it would stop the impeachment. Apparently, with new allegations coming out and with the people in the streets, it's not going to be like that.
Of course, whether there are many people in the streets, whether there's political infighting going on the streets or in the Senate, are phenomena on the surface. But people wanted to know really what's going on among the different political parties inside Brazil, and how is Petrobras, for example, this corruptive case, linked to all the overall political landscape inside your country. Mr. Tan, very briefly, help us to understand this.
Well, like I said, every political party or every politician really had to have donations and under-the-table donations. And so basically, apparently, from what has been uncovered, is that the Workers' Party controlled several of the government companies, not only Petrobras, and apparently they wanted to get a lot of funds from these public companies to maintain their power for their elections and to maintain their power. So that has been uncovered by a large degree. Now, whether President Lula is the head of the robbery and whether Dilma Rousseff is involved is a question that the courts will be determining.
Very interesting issue going on in Brazil. A lot of domestic political scenes and also traditions over there. Hard to judge from the outside, but certainly thank you so much, both of you, for explaining to us, Charles Tang and also Paulo Sotelo, for being with us. Thank you, really appreciate it. Stay with us here on World Insight. We've got our segments coming right up. Stay with us here on World Insight. Our final segment coming up. Ahead of Boao Forum, we talk to Secretary General Zhou Wenzhong. And also we hear from Stephen Schwarzman, business magnate and CEO and founder of Blackstone. He's donating some of his significant wealth to education in China. You're watching World Insight on CCTV News. The four-day 2016 annual conference of the Boao Forum for Asia will begin tomorrow in Boao, Hainan. On its 15th anniversary, the forum's theme this year is Asia's New Future, New Dynamics and New Vision. Earlier, I spoke with the Secretary General of the Boao Forum of Asia, Ambassador Zhou Wenzhong in an exclusive interview. Before we get to the details, let's learn more about Ambassador Zhou and the forum itself.
A forum with a focus on Asia. Founded in 2002, the Boa Forum for Asia is a non-profit organization that hosts high-level forums for leaders from government, business and academia in Asia and around the world. It's known as the Asian Davos and is committed to promoting regional economic integration and bringing Asian countries even closer to their development goals. Attendees of the forum will travel from various emerging and frontier markets together in Hainan, where they will discuss topics related to this year's theme, Asia's new future, new dynamics and new vision. At the head of the forum is the board of directors, consisting of 18 members elected from former senior government officials, scholars, business leaders and other preeminent individuals. As Secretary General of the board, Mr. Zhou Wenzhong has a sharp resume. In 2003, he was promoted to Vice Minister of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of China. From 2005 to 2010, he served as Ambassador of the People's Republic of China to the United States. Since 2010, he has served as the Secretary General for the Boa Forum.
Ambassador Zhou, since the Boa Forum, even though it's an Asian forum, it is based in China, in Boao. And therefore many people wonder whether there has been very strong China incentive among all the topics.
China is a host country, but we report, the Secretariat reports its work to the board of the PFA. And many of those board members are former government, either head of state or heads of government, such as the former Prime Minister of Singapore, former Prime Minister of Malaysia, and the former president from Indonesia, and so on and so forth. So, I think the agenda of our annual meeting has had the approval of the board, and so they support the agenda wholeheartedly.
I got the pleasure of listening on the sidelines some of your board meetings. It seems many of the board members have different views about some of the most important issues facing Asia. Is Boao just going to be another talk shop and therefore not necessarily going to help with the eventual resolve of some most concerning issues of Asia?
What we want to do is to provide a platform where people could come up with their opinions about certain issues. And of course, it will be still better if they could reach consensus. If not, I think it will be an opportunity for those who have a good exchange of their views. And they may take more time, it may take longer for them to reach a consensus on certain issues. And I think it doesn't matter.
One of the things of doing forums and conferences in Asia has a lot to do with its culture. Asian culture tends to be modest, not talk harshly in front of people. So for a forum like yours, most participants are Asian, topics are Asian related. How can you make sure it is really going to serve its purpose? People speak out, try to reach consensus, fight things out intellectually, eventually help to stabilize the region and help with economic development.
I've been with the forum since 2010, so it's been a couple of years for me to work for the forum under the leadership of the board. So we try to help people to find ways to make sure that there will be continued economic growth in Asia.
And Boao Forum has been holding conferences and sub-conferences around the world these days, not just in Asia. What are the thoughts behind all of these?
I think we need to take Boao to the world. And Boao, of course, is an organization for Asia, but it's not just for Asia. We need to reach out. So that's why we have, in the past couple of years, we have started doing conferences overseas. For instance, this year we plan to go to Kazakhstan to do a conference in late May, which would focus on infrastructure development, trying to explore how to hook up the One Belt, One Road and Euro-Asia Economic Alliance. And we also, at the invitation of Victoria State of Australia, we plan to go to Australia in late this year, in November. And then the focus will be on finance of that conference, which will be held in Melbourne.
Things have been changing so fast, and Bo has been with us for many years. What about its future?
This board has about 2 more years, and then there will be a change of the board. But I think I'm confident that no matter who will be the next new board members, who will be the next new chairman or vice chairman, they will continue to work hard to make sure that World Forum BFA will remain a very open platform, a platform which would help people to pull together their sort of ideas and to try to reach out to more people in the region. Yeah.
Mr. Ambassador, it's such a pleasure to have you. All the best. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Ambassador Zhou Wenzhong, Secretary General of the Boao Forum for Asia, talking to us earlier. You're watching World Insight on CCTV News. China has been brainstorming about its educational reform for some time. Now a new project emerges and brings in new momentum. It combines the best of the world with one of the best Chinese universities.
A boost for education cooperation. More than 100 years ago, Tsinghua University, called Tsinghua College at that time, was established in Beijing on the site of a former royal garden. Run by the Qing dynasty government, China's last feudal dynasty, Tsinghua was a preparatory school for students on their way to study in the US. Now things have changed. Tsinghua University has become one of the most renowned universities in Asia. And it will now be a venue for some of the world's most brilliant young people to have a taste of China and receive a master's degree through the Schwarzman Scholars Program, named after American business magnate Stephen Schwarzman. It is the single largest philanthropic initiative undertaken in China by largely international donors. Announced in 2013, the program aims to educate the next generation of global leaders. It has received public support from both American President Barack Obama and Chinese President Xi Jinping. Attendees of the program will live in a new residence called Schwarzman College, also funded by Schwarzman. The program will launch in June of this year and will award scholarships to 200 scholars from around the world each year for a one-year master's degree in either public policy, international relations, engineering, or economics and business.
Stephen Schwarzman is an American financier and business magnate who is well known for his ferocious, straight-talking style. He donated about $100 million for the Tsinghua project and has vowed to raise funds all over the world to ensure that the endowment will eventually reach $400 million in total. I caught up with him recently on the sideline of the China Development Forum held in Beijing. He spoke about the motives behind the project, which is one of his biggest philanthropic efforts to ever be undertaken in this country, and why he felt it was crucial that China should be the backdrop.
Change is always an interesting thing in any culture. Change in the academic world, no matter where you are, it is always slow. And making change in China has challenges, particularly for outsiders.
It's almost like a pregnancy, isn't it? To establish the Schwarzman Scholarship and to see eventually the first batch of students being selected.
Yes, well, we selected the first group of students in January, and they're really phenomenal on a world scale. And we had one of the most selective programs in the world. Only 3.7% of the students who applied were accepted, and of the ones we made offers to, we got 95% of them. Now, 3.7% is like really twice as selective as Harvard and Yale and the great universities around the world.
Did you ever talk to some of them?
Of course.
During the whole process preparing for this Schwarzman scholarship, in which is the most challenging part?
Geez, every piece of this is a challenge. Actually, when we started this, I happened to be doing a panel for one of the newspapers in the United States, and there was somebody sitting in the room with me before we went on, and I asked him for $25 million for this non-existent program, and he just looked at me, and I explained it to him. Just by luck, he had had experience in China, and he said, "Fine, I'll give you $10 million, and if you could really make it work well, maybe I'll give you the 25." I thought it was really easy, but as it's worked out, I sort of only go 1 for 17, which is a terrible percentage. In my commercial life, it's almost 100% when we ask people, to invest with us, because we have a very good record. So it's 1 for 17. So it's like going back to the start of my company when no one knew us. So that was one experience.
Blackstone, what you're doing has nothing to do really with education, even though you were doing sporadic projects with American universities, but having international students coming to a Chinese university and offering almost like a Rhodes Scholarship
Yes.
by a private individual is something amazing.
Well, I came up with the idea because the Chenhua people wanted me to do something of a financial nature, and I only wanted to do something that I thought would be consequential and important to the world. And what I saw was increasing populism and frustration in the developed world. And typically that creates the opportunity for politicians to direct anger at someone, whether it's wealthy people, whether it's financial people, or whether it's countries. Anyone that the populations feel is winning the game. And I believe that ultimately that would be directed against China. And since the year 1500, there have been 15 times when you've had a challenger country challenging the incumbent power. In this case, the challenger is China. The incumbent power is the United States. Historically, in 12 of those 15 times, there have been wars between the challengers and the incumbents. And that is an impossible scenario to happen in the modern world. So I believed that that was a problem I wanted to address. And the way to address it, I looked at the Rhodes Scholarship and said, if we can attract remarkable people from all around the world to come to China, and through the relationships at Chenhua, meet the leaders of the country, get mentors from China of famous people in the students' area of study, take them on trips around the country, plus have their academics and get a master's degree, that this type of unique exposure would create a cadre of 200 students a year, of which about 45% would be from the United States, 20% from China, and 35% from the rest of the world. So these people can understand China and go back to their countries where they'll become leaders. And there'll be 10,000 of these students over a long period of time in steady state who become leaders of the world.
The program will do much to deepen understanding between China and Western countries. Steve Allen Schwarzman, the founder of the program, is the chairman and CEO of the Blackstone Group, a global private equity and financial advisory firm. After graduating from Harvard Business School, Schwarzman started working at the investment bank Lehman Brothers, where he eventually became the head of the global mergers and acquisition team. In 1985, Schwarzman and his boss, Pete Peterson, founded Blackstone. In 2007, Schwarzman was listed among Time magazine's 100 most influential people in the world. As of 2015, Forbes ranked Schwarzman 100th on its World's Billionaires list. Schwarzman has earned a reputation as a donor. In 2008, Schwarzman contributed $100 million toward the expansion of the New York Public Library. In 2015, Schwarzman contributed $150 million to fund a campus center at Yale University. As a business magnate, Schwarzman is known for his hands-on work style.
There have been people telling me, off the record of course, that you always have a very hands-on practice. You have an idea about everything and you want them to implement. And that works in your venture capital life, but many wonder, will that work in the educational front, in which you are not an expert? Well, or at least to begin with.
One thing in life that's important is knowing what you don't know. And I am very hands-on because when I have a vision, I like to work with people around to make that vision occur. However, when I don't know what to do in a certain area, I don't invent it. I go to people who are terrific, which is why we assembled a group of 23 educators from around the world, ranging from, you know, the president of Yale and the head of Oxford and professors from Harvard and Yale and Princeton and Stanford and a lot of other major universities to help with that element of things. Experiment.
How would you compare your project, for example, the Schwarzman Scholars, with what some of the others have been doing, billionaires so-called, Bill Gates, for example, with his foundation and his clean energy initiatives and some of the others? How would you compare what you are enthusiastic about this project with theirs?
Well, geez, everybody does different things. That's one of the wonderful things about people around the world and people who have resources who are trying to solve problems. One thing I've learned is there are an infinite amount of problems, from educational issues to diseases, to malnutrition, to income inequality. There are all kinds of interesting issues that you can spend time on. And for me, I like creating new things. It's sort of like entrepreneurship used in other areas, and I like to get involved personally. I think some of the things that Bill has done are really amazing. It's the biggest foundation in the world. He's going out to cure malaria and other diseases, and it's a big operation. Ours is not so big. You know, it's myself and some other people, along with a team led by David Lee, right, and the senior officials at Shenhua, President Zhou, sort of creating something. And so this is like a one-off. And some of the people you've described have put large amounts of money in a foundation and hired a professional staff to address a wide range of issues. I sort of like to deal with one thing at a time.
What do you think after all of this could be your takeaway, personal takeaway, from the very beginning until this moment, working on this project which started from nothing? And secondly, what do you want the students, the first class of Schwarzman Scholars, take away with them after they finish the curriculum on the campus of Tsinghua?
Well, my takeaway is doing startups in China isn't the easiest thing I've ever tried to do on a global scale. And you know, making change is not as easy as you imagine, but you can do it with the goodwill and judgment and help, you know, from the Shenhua people who've been terrific. But every organizations have their own built-in things. So I must say that this was harder. Even raising the money was harder. We're up close to $400 million, and it's done person by person, corporation by corporation, and everyone's of goodwill. But some people have already given a lot to Chinese causes, and so when I talk to them, they say, "Geez, I would have helped you, but I'm sorry, I've already done this in China." So that was it was not the easiest thing to do. Looking back, you know, it's a lot easier than being involved. In terms of what I'd like the takeaway to be for these students is I would like them to be totally excited about China and totally appreciative of the really remarkable things of China and knowledge about the shortfalls. And no place is perfect, no culture you know, works 100%, even for the people in it. And so, you know, they'll learn about some things that will surprise them. They'll hit some, you know, bumps in the road. But overall, these people will all be fundamentally changed. And what I want is for them to take their place in the world and be able to bring China to the table.
Right.
And if we can do that with people of this quality, with a long-term relationship with China, the world will be a better place.
Will you send your children to the scholarship?
I don't have a choice. I don't select the people. You know, so.
Such a wonderful thing to have you on CCTV News. Great to see you.
Thanks.
Thank you so
Terrific.
much. That's Stephen Schwarzman, co-founder and chairman of Blackstone, and the man behind the Schwarzman Scholars, a project in which the world's most brilliant young people will receive a scholarship for 1 year special master's degree at Tsinghua University in Beijing. The project is the single largest philanthropic initiative undertaken in China by largely international donors. Schwarzman believes in influencing the younger generation of leaders and supports informed decisions making between China and the rest of the world. And that is all the time we have for today. If you'd like to see more of a program, visit our website. Just type in World Insight CCTV News into your search engine. You will be able to find us, or you can also check out our YouTube channel. From me, Tian Wei, and everyone at the World Insight team, thanks for watching, and tune in again tomorrow for more insights from across China and around the world. Good night.